Hello and welcome to Eastern Europe Review, a program focusing on Belarus, Ukraine and Russia. This is a joint production of BELSAT TV and TVP World. My name is Dmitry Mitskevich, and here are the main topics of today's issue. Mass arrests of Belarusians in Russia by Lukashenko regime services.
There has never been such mass detention or such mass action by the punishers.
Chechen leader claims to use Ukrainian prisoners of war as human shields.
This is an admission of another violation of international humanitarian law.
Former US Marine develops military technology for Ukraine.
It's Russia who invaded Ukraine. It's Russia who started this war.
The Commonwealth of Independent States remains a dangerous region for Belarusians. During a two-day operation by security forces of the Lukashenko regime across CIS countries, approximately 300 people were detained, with most arrests occurring in Russia. It remains unclear whether any of the detainees face political charges. However, the Lukashenko regime is known to employ all available means to persecute Belarusians abroad as well.
Mass arrests of Belarusians are happening abroad. Within a span of just 2 days, approximately 300 people were detained, with over 140 of them in Russia alone. This was a special roundup organized by Lukashenko's security forces in the Commonwealth of Independent States.
There has never been such mass detention or such mass action by the punishers, both those in Moscow and those in Minsk.
Among those detained are people accused under criminal charges, as well as defendants in civil and economic cases. For example, security forces discovered in Moscow a director of a Minsk travel agency who allegedly defrauded 30 citizens and embezzled more than $40,000.
If a person is declared wanted in the Republic of Belarus, they are subsequently added to the interstate wanted list. As a rule, this applies to the Russian Federation, where many criminals are located, especially in cases involving drugs and fraud.
The representative of the Association of Former Belarusian Security Forces, the Belpol Initiative, does not rule out that among the detainees are people wanted under political charges. This year, the former ambassador of Belarus to Russia, Dmitry Krutoy, proposed uniting the databases of so-called extremists in Belarus and Russia.
Citizens are surprised when part of the media content recognized, let's say, as extremist in Russia is published in our country, or vice versa, when those recognized as extremist in our country publish messages in Russia. What's more, no criminal cases are initiated in the Russian Federation against these structures or people who, for example, have fled to Russia, and the same applies vice versa.
Following these statements by the official, 3,000 Belarusians were added to the Russian wanted list, as noted by journalists from Media Zona. Among those listed are politicians, journalists, social activists, Belarusian volunteers, and former political prisoners, as well as individuals who left Belarus without serving a prison sentence. For example, a former political prisoner, Tatyana Ostrovskaya, discovered her name on the Russian database.
They throw each other into mutual inactivity, helplessness, and unnecessary actions. I feel safe in the country where I'm now, thanks to Poland, which welcomed me.
Russia is the country from which Belarusians are most frequently extradited at the request of Lukashenko's security forces. Since August 2020, at least 45 people have been deported to Belarus solely on charges related to protests.
In the Russian Federation, all movements of citizens and hotel check-ins are closely monitored. They have even begun to use facial recognition technology to a large extent to find out whether a given face corresponds to a specific person and if that person is wanted. This is how they catch people.
Alies Mihalevich considers Central Asian countries, as well as Armenia and Azerbaijan, to be dangerous for Belarusians who are at risk of being detained on political charges.
I believe that these countries should generally be avoided by people who are part of the at-risk group.
Meanwhile, Andrei Hnot, one of the founders of the Free Sportsman community, who was detained in Serbia in 2023 at the request of the Lukashenko regime to Interpol, was evacuated to the European Union this week. He spent 7 months in a Serbian prison and 5 months under house arrest.
On the morning of October the 29th, the roof of a building at the Russian Special Forces University in Gudermes, Chechnya, caught fire. This facility is the largest base in Russia for training mercenaries for the war against Ukraine. According to the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, the fire resulted from the first drone attack in the region. Initially, Kadyrov claimed that the building was empty and that no one was hurt. However, he later changed his statement, alleging that the attack had killed Ukrainian prisoners of war.
As I said earlier, there were no casualties on our side as a result of the attack. But there are casualties among the Ukrainian prisoners. Up to 10 Ukrainian prisoners are being held at each strategic facility in the Republic, including on the territory of the Russian Special Forces University. Kyiv, trying to harm us, has killed its own soldiers.
Such a statement is, in fact, an admission of a war crime.
This is an admission of another violation of international humanitarian law, specifically a breach of the Geneva Conventions. However, violations occur everywhere. The Russian Federation is in violation of the Geneva Convention on prisoners of war in nearly every aspect.
It is important to note that Kadyrov did not provide any evidence for his claims. Meanwhile, Ukrainian human rights activists point out that Chechen formations are using new tactics to retrieve their prisoners.
We know that Ukrainians are being held in Grozny, but the Red Cross has no access to them, and they also have no contact with the outside world. We have an approximate number and the identities of those held in Chechnya. According to the accounts of former prisoners of war who were detained in Grozny, Kadyrov's men are buying Ukrainian prisoners of war from other units of the Russian armed forces to create their own unofficial exchange fund and return only the captured members of Kadyrov's Akhmat unit.
However, it is obvious that Kadyrov does not have the authority to conduct negotiations with Ukraine regarding the return of prisoners independently from the Kremlin.
This is a story of corruption. The negotiators who have a mandate from the Russian authorities take money from Kadyrov and include his people in the necessary lists. There's nothing complicated about this. The percentage of Kadyrovites included in the exchanges is significantly higher than that of other Russian servicemen from different units.
Human rights activists have no information indicating that Ukrainian prisoners, whether military or civilian, are being held permanently in Chechnya.
None of the released prisoners of war we managed to speak with said that they had been constantly held in Chechnya. We're also not aware of a single case where any university premises were used to detain prisoners. Ukrainian prisoners of war are mainly held in the occupied territories, specifically in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine.
Islam Belokiev, the former press secretary of the Sheikh Mansour Chechen battalion fighting on the side of Ukraine, asserts that the statements made by the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, regarding Ukrainian prisoners of war in Gudermes are false. A Chechen human rights activist, Abu Bakr Yangulbayev, shares this opinion.
If there had been victims, Kadyrov would gladly pronounce their names just to gloat to the relatives of the prisoners of war. I have no doubt that no prisoners of war have been harmed there.
Analysts note that in this case, it is highly likely that Kadyrov is bluffing. By doing so, the head of Chechnya is attempting to protect himself from new attacks by Ukrainian drones, given the weakness of the air defense system.
A former Chinese citizen joined the United States Marine Corps to serve as a contracted soldier in the Ukrainian International Legion. Although his service has ended, he has decided to remain in Odessa, where together with his friend he is developing artificial intelligence technologies which they wish to transfer to the armed forces of Ukraine.
Use YouTube, cannot use Google, cannot use ChatGPT, anything. The only thing you can use in China is the Chinese apps, and they all controlled by the government. Yeah.
This is how Atticus Freeman, a former Chinese citizen, describes his homeland, which he now considers a foreign country. In 2022, he received a job offer from Apple to move to the United States. At the time, Ukraine was facing a full-scale invasion by Russia, and Atticus decided to help fight against the aggressor.
This war started when I was in Shanghai, and this full-scale invasion, I would say from the first day of this war, I spent a lot of time on the news, and I personally donated like 3 iPads, 2 drones, a bunch of other stuff to Ukraine, and I always wanted to come here, but I don't have the convenience because I was a Chinese passport holder, and it's super difficult for a Chinese passport holder to come here. So I want to get the US passport first. And yeah, I finally got it in March 2094.
As an expert in computer technology, Atticus closely monitored the disinformation being spread not only by the Kremlin, but also by pro-government Chinese media. He even started a YouTube channel to combat the false narratives.
The majority of the Chinese people are living in the lies. It's just like the Soviet Union people, like 30 years ago. They cannot get the information from the outside world. It's super hard. It's like black and white. It's Russia who invaded Ukraine. It's Russia who started this war. I know there are a lot of misinformation out there, especially in China, on social media. A bunch of them, supporters of Russia, supporters of Putin. But since 2014, I argued with a lot of my friends in China, and it's so obvious. It's so obvious that if you get some basic truth, you will easily can tell who's wrong, who's right, right. Yeah.
In the International Legion, Atticus performed technical tasks related to his specialty. When his contract ended, he decided to remain in Ukraine and focus on developing solutions for the Ukrainian army. He is assisted by his friend, Wang Jixian, who is also from China. Wang has over 10 years of experience in artificial intelligence and robotics. Their primary goal is to leverage modern technologies to save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Promising applications of the new technology include drone control and enhanced radio communications.
Why we need those soldiers come to the dangerous area? Majorly because of the radio, because the signal is not reliable enough, because it's a jammer. Then we should have an AI program to automatically do the frequency change. And these, in detail technology, you can imagine it's like how you remotely control a car. Every time it has encryption, they change the passcode.
According to Atticus Freeman and Wang Jixian, there is currently no need to seek external funding for their projects. All they require are specialists. The programmers aim to share their developments with the armed forces of Ukraine.
That's all for today. Eastern Europe Review will be back next Sunday. Please stay with DVP World and stand with Ukraine.